morning. I'm John Fink, and we'll be looking today at if there's competitiveness in Major League Baseball and how market size affects winning percentage. So a brief outline of the presentation. There'll be a background which will explain some key questions I want to answer, as well as why it's overall important, the key literature that I used in this research, and then my theoretical and empirical framework to, one, justify why I'm running this project and using the tools to analyze what my questions. And then my data sources, I have 4 different data sources, and I'll explain what I got from each one. And then my results analysis and a counterfactual exercise. We'll look at how I try to answer that question and how we can manipulate some variables around to see how different changes in a variable such as payroll will affect winning percentage on different types of teams. And then my conclusion, which will be my key findings, as well as some limitations and continuation for the future. So I have 3 key questions to answer in this research project. How does payroll affect winning percentage of Major League Baseball teams? How does population size of the city that the team plays in affect their winning percentage? And overall, is Major League Baseball becoming more or less competitive? So this is important because large market teams could have an unfair advantage in baseball. If they're constantly doing better than small market teams, this will decrease interest in the game, as well as there's no hard salary cap in Major League Baseball, unlike a lot of other leagues. So if large market teams can just keep spending more and more, and if that is affecting their winning percentages significantly, this could be a problem for the league. So some key literature, Levlin, Mitchell, Volker, and Will in 2000, they formed the Blue Ribbon Panel report, and a little background from that. In the decade of 1990s to 2000, baseball was being dominated by a few large market teams. So baseball formed a Blue Ribbon Panel with these economists, and they looked at how payroll and population size of cities were affecting their winning percentages. Overall, they concluded that the league had a huge issue with competitiveness in their report, and they suggested major changes like a hard salary cap in 2000. So then Schmidt and Berry in 2002, they had a challenge of the Blue Ribbon Panel, and they researched also how market size affected winning percentage from 1990 to 2000. What they found is that payroll and population size did have significant effects on winning percentage, but they were very small effects. And I mean, you would think that payroll would help your team have a better winning percentage, but it just depends on how strong that coefficient is. And they found that it was fairly weak and that they didn't have a problem with competitiveness. They also looked at created a Gini coefficient on winning percentage, which measured how fair the league was, how many teams were at the bottom of the league and the top if there's huge disparities, and from 1901 to 2000. And they actually found that the league was more competitive than ever from 1990 to 2000 with the American League and National League Gini coefficients. So they disputed the Blue Ribbon Panel's claim. And then Ballmer and Zimbalist in 2004, they looked at 1990 data, 2000 as well. And year to year, they found 10 to 35% of winning percentage could be contributed to payroll. 35% is a lot more problematic to the league than closer to 10%. So they found this did vary quite a bit. But when it was around 35%, then that would be more supportive of the Blue Ribbon Panel. The lower that is, it would be more supportive of Schmidt and Berry's claim. They also looked at 2003 to 2011. And they found between this time, there's a fairly weak correlation between payroll and winning percentage, more towards the under 20% range. So my theoretical framework, this is from Krotman in 2009. So first we have to explain how talent is allocated across teams. Krotman found that large market teams have a higher marginal revenue product than small market teams. What marginal revenue product means the extra revenue that's generated per additional worker that's hired. So in this case, when they sign players. So large market teams got more marginal revenue by signing more players, their top talent, than small market teams. So this gave them he found that large market teams optimally would choose to sign more talent than small market teams. Large market teams also have more demand for games, and this demand creates more marginal revenue for having successful seasons. It's an incentive to spend more and win more. So he concluded that with higher demands, with teams with higher demands, they purchase more player talent and they would have a higher winning percentage. So what is the difference in this demand across teams? So this first equation right here, we have the marginal revenue product equals marginal revenue times marginal product. So Krotman assumed that marginal product was equal, of the marginal product of a player was equal across every team. So the differences in demand solely arose from differences in marginal revenue. And this bottom equation, when we derive marginal revenue in this way, it's the total revenues of a change in its output, which in this case is winning percentage. So we can, by deriving marginal revenue in this way, we can find variations in winning percentage that lead to variations in revenue, which can be estimated in a regression analysis, which is what I will be doing shortly here. So my empirical framework, I did a panel regression equation where win is the winning percentage of each team, and from 2010 to 2017. Payroll is an opening day payroll of each team. MSA is the metropolitan statistical area population size of the city that the team plays in. And T is time, that would be 2010 to 2017, and I is team, which there's 30 teams. This summation over here is 29 dummy variables that were included. This was done to help fix the effects of every team individually, so the regression ran each team by itself, and this helped make a little bit stronger regression. I also took the natural logs of both payroll and MSA, and I did this for two reasons. I did this one because we expect as payroll and MSA increase, we see diminishing returns to the winning percentage. Eventually, you're not going to see the same rate winning percentage go up at some level of payroll. You can't just keep going up and up and up with payroll and MSA. And also, it's easier to explain economically the significance of these variables when they're in a natural log form, because we can talk about percent changes. And then my predicted values of these two variables, I predicted both from the literature, both payroll and MSA to have positive signs on winning percentage. So my data sources. I said I had 4 different ones. MLB.com, they provided me with total wins of each team from 2010 to 2017. I found their winning percentages by dividing their total wins by the total games they each played in each season. USA Today, they compiled all opening day payrolls from each team for the last 8 years. The U.S. Census Bureau had information on all the American MSAs. And because Toronto Blue Jays play in this league, I had to use Statistics Canada to find their metropolitan statistical area. So my empirical results, I found with previous literature that the payroll was statistically significant at a 1% level. So with this coefficient of 0.045. So as payroll increases by 1%, winning percentage is expected to increase by 0.00045. So this supported my previous prediction and what the previous literature had said. On the other hand, my MSA variable was found to be not significant at any level, and also was a large negative coefficient. It's the opposite of what literature had shown me and what I expected. And also my constant was not significant at any level, and it was much larger than anticipated with a 2.492. I believe this is due to the large negative coefficient that MSA has a factor on that constant, so it brings it down quite a ways. And then looking at my R squared of 0.2371, that is what I pretty much expected to have with only this limited amount of variables in this regression, because there's a lot of other things that go into winning percentage than just these two variables, but as Balmer and Zabalas already shown, 10 to 35% of winning percentage could be attributed to payroll. So this is 23.71%, the same between these two, and probably mostly between payroll, because of the MSA is actually the opposite sign of what I expected. So as I said before, Schmidt and Berry when they were arguing against the blue ribbon panel, they used a Gini coefficient of winning percentage to measure the competitiveness of the league, the inequality between wins. So they found Gini coefficients from 1901 to 2000, and as you can see, there's been a steady decline in both the American League and National League. So I took their same calculations, and I found the 2010 to 2017 Gini coefficients. So we see the AL continued to fall slightly and the NL rose slightly, but both of these weren't dramatic jumps by any means. So it stayed pretty constant with their previous calculations as well. And then for a little counterfactual exercise, I looked at how do changes in payroll affect winning percentage. So right here I have 3 different teams. I have a large market team in the New York Yankees in the blue, a medium-sized market, the Washington Nationals in orange, and a small market, the Tampa Bay Rays. So basically, and on the y-axis we have the projected winning percentages, and on the x-axis we have changes in their average payroll over that 8-year period that I looked at, with 10% increments on each side. So one thing we see here is as payroll increases, we see a uniform increase in all 3 different teams. They both increase by pretty much the same percentage. They just start at different levels, which is another point. The large market team has the higher projected winning percentage at every level, and then the medium-sized market, and then the small-sized market. One other interesting point that I found here was there's a larger increase when we have 30% less payroll up to your no change payroll in all these teams than from your no change up to 30%. And I believe this shows that it maybe is more important to these teams to get back to their average payroll rather than increasing from that payroll for their projected winning percentages. So some conclusions, my key findings again. I found payroll is significant at every level of significance, and it definitely has a factor on winning percentage, which is supported my predictions and past literature. On the other hand, MSA, the population variable, was inconclusive here. It had a very large negative coefficient, where in other literature it had a positive coefficient. So that is something that I am trying to figure out why maybe that happened right now. And then my Gini coefficient overall was stable to go along with Schmidt and Barry's work before. I found there's slight changes and slight drops in the AL and NL, but overall it wasn't huge changes. And then some business and policy importance. Overall, I don't think that MLB has a huge problem with competitiveness due to the payroll discrepancies. So I would agree more with Schmidt and Barry in their assessments, and I would argue against the Blue Ribbon panel, saying that there's not dramatic changes that Major League Baseball needs to make right now. Some limitations. So I had a lack of revenue data in other research. They had access in the 1990s, 2000s, a lot of economists, when they ran their regression analysis, they had access to total revenues, gate revenues, like different TV revenues. Teams aren't required to release that, and so I didn't have that for my 2010 to 2017 data, which would have made my regression a lot stronger. It would have probably helped me find different, more or better conclusions than what I did. So that is something that I would like to perhaps find looking forward, maybe looking at the 2000 to 2009 seasons and seeing if they have revenue data available. Also, there's potential MSA outliers, as I said, as the large negative coefficient. Teams in large population bases like the New York Mets and like the Chicago White Sox have been very bad this decade. So they could be possibly skewing this data very negatively. I think one way to possibly fix that for the future would be we just include more years of data. I think they might be bad for this 8-year period, but if we included more like 30 years, we might get a general sense of how the population variable truly affects winning percentage better than how I had it. And again, I would do this research for the 2000 2009 seasons as I did 2010 and 2017, and there's a little gap there, and I would also continue to look at Schmidt and Barry's Gini coefficients from that time as well. And that's all I have.
Questions? Did you ever look at maybe like World Series appearances or wins? I mean, if you pretty much look in the past decade, there's the Dodgers, Astros, Cubs, all these teams are pretty much top 10 in payroll, and especially the Red Sox, with a very slim amount of people that are maybe mid to under your standard for payroll, like the Royals and Cardinals, I guess. But most of the time, it's the high payroll teams. So
I think I didn't look at it that way, and previous literature had, but I think like if you're just looking at maybe a World Series or deep in the playoffs, you might be missing some points. Like, let's say the Twins make the playoffs this year, we would be very happy about that. And I don't think if we're just looking at like World Series appearances, I think we're missing the point that different teams can still have successful seasons without winning a championship or getting close to it.
To build off of that, does the revenue of a team connect to winning percentage more so than
Yes.
short-term successes like the World Series?
So I found that in my research, I was disappointed that I didn't have this revenue data since I was planning on using it. But a lot of research linked population size of the city with revenue data. So I thought that might be a good replacement for that. But yeah, revenue data is studied definitely intensely for, it might be even more powerful than, for sure, than population in the city, I think, the size of the city.
Could you slide a couple back where you showed the
Yeah.
three teams? That showed an increase in winning percentage for each team,
Yes.
but it also looks like they're winning more games at the end, so to speak, because they've
Yeah.
got higher payroll, right?
Right, so all these three teams, they have their projected winning percentages increase when they have more payroll. But the interesting thing is, like, the New York Yankees were projected always to be higher than the Nationals and the Rays, and the Nationals are projected to always be higher than the Rays, and that's just those are the large market, the medium market, and the small market.
Did you look at having multiple teams in the same market like Chicago and Los Angeles and New York, and how that changed your data?
I thought about doing that, but with because I didn't include revenue data, that would probably be the most way that having two teams in a city would affect revenue. It wouldn't really affect. I don't think it would affect their payroll or their population size. So that wasn't included. But if I would do revenue data, I would include that for sure.
You mentioned how you use like the natural law of the variables, because kind of just to kind of how maybe you should explain as well as like the diminishing returns. But if you go back to the slide you were just currently on, we see that like it does seem like it tapers off kind of, but you're already at like 30%, which is close to 50% increase, which for some teams can mean like close to like hundreds of $1 million increase in pay. Where you have like the Yankees, so they're getting way more than you have like the Rays getting. So do you think that or would you try to experiment kind of looking at like if you increase their pay like 100% necessarily double it, what effect it has on the winning?
So just I only looked at just these 6 increments right there. I think that the Yankees have that. Well, I think the diminishing returns is also shown kind of here because we see when it's less than their average, it increases their average 20% does increase more from the -30 to the 0 than it does from the 0 to the 30. So I think that also kind of does demonstrate a little bit of the diminishing returns that we might see.
Others? Well, thank you.